This is the Tournament of Champions Finals Part 2. If you haven't checked out Part 1, I'd go back and check it out. It was great. Steve and Jeremy progressed to the finals matchup. David Gans is picking the songs. He's going to play 3 songs, and whoever has the lower aggregate score wins the Tournament of Champions. Obviously, if there's a tie, we'll just play more songs. Enjoy. Okay, so that was the jam Out of a Comes a Time at the Orpheum Theater in San Francisco on July 17th, 1976. Beautiful pick. David, tell us about that one.
I love 76. There's so much good music going on in that time. They were really listening to each other. I chose this in particular because it got released a couple of years ago finally. And I've always thought it was one of my favorite moments of the year. And I actually have something I want to read for you. As I said earlier, I've spoken to a lot of musicians about this music for a couple of different book projects. And I want to read from you a conversation I had with Peter Lavazzoli a few years ago. Peter I met him when he was a drummer of Crazy Fingers in South Florida, where he still plays with them when he's not doing this other stuff. But he toured with the JGB for quite a while, Melvin and the JGB. He tours as part of the Gilmore Project. And he played on O'Teal Burbridge's beautiful new record, Lovely View of Heaven. And I think he plays in O'Teal's live band from time to time as well. So I'm going to read, and he's written a couple of books. He wrote a wonderful book called Bhairavi, A History of Indian Music in America. And I'm going to read to you what Peter told me about this. 76 is different, just like 75. 75 and 76, Mickey is back, but they're still in that kind of blues for Olive phase where it still has a little bit of that jazzy fluidity that was there during the era when Mickey was not there. You can still hear traces of 73 and 74 in the 76 Grateful Dead during like playing in the band. In 76, they had a lot of great segues where they were weaving a lot of things in and out of each other. Slipknot and Eyes of the World and Dancin'. Phil is still playing with a lot of fluidity in 76. The drummers are both still playing with a lot of dynamics. Keith is still playing a lot more. So I would say to people, don't overlook 76 for the jazzier side of the Dead's playing. They started to lose that in 77, but you still heard a lot of these jazzy dynamics in 76 with the rhythm section. It's a lot more fluid. Keith, Phil, the drummers, there's a lot of give and take and a lot of sensitivity there. The show that really epitomizes that for me is from the Orpheum in San Francisco from the July 76 run, the second to last show of the tour. It's my favorite show of the year. They come out of Comes a Time with this incredible jam that leads into the other one. What they do is, this is the first time this happened with Comes a Time. They did 2 versions of Comes a Time before this in June. Jerry finishes singing the song, and they're playing the F sharp minor and G back and forth. And then Phil starts putting a D note on top of the F sharp minor, which kind of make it like a D major 7th. Then he would play an A under the G, almost like a reverse tighten up progression. They hinted at it on June 12th in Boston and at the Tower Theater on June 22nd. These versions, they come out, it comes a time and start flirting with that jam, but then they bring the song to a close very quickly and they don't go anywhere with it. On 717, this has a point actually, friends. On 717, they go all out with it. It's a beautiful comes a time. Coming out of it, Phil plays a D and A back and forth while the others are going F sharp minor G. It really totally takes the jam to an amazing place. They stick with that theme that Phil brings in and they really start working with that. Now Jerry is changing what he's playing in response to that. It takes on a whole different flavor, and then Phil changes again. Now he goes from D to G instead of A, which gives it more of a minor feel. That lasts for a couple minutes, and then they go into an 11 jam. Very unusual. It's not like they're playing the chords of the 11, but they're playing like the comes of time jam in an 11 beat cycle. Phil sets that up, signaling beats 10 and 11. The drummers pick up on that right away, and all of a sudden it's the same chord progression, but now they're doing it in an 11 beat cycle. It's another one of those moments. You don't plan that kind of thing. It just comes out. Like that Miami show 62374 where US Blues just comes out. This jam goes on for a good while, and it's always riveting. It's always fascinating what they're doing. And finally, they back off that. Then they go into the other one. So there's so much going on in this music, and it's really amazing to talk with people that listen so closely to it. And Pete's one of those guys, you know. And I just thought that it's so, you know, you can listen to so much Grateful Dead music in that kind of detail and really hear the conversation. Another interesting way to evaluate that is to listen to the several different mixes of the 22769 Dark Star, originally mixed by Bob and Betty for Live Dead, and then later mixed at least once more for the Fillmore West 69 box set, and I think it might have been mixed once more for something else. And there's a lot of sculpting that goes on to take out the loose parts of various things when you have the opportunity to go back. But these people are, as Owsley said when he met these people, they were the smartest, you know, group of people he'd ever come across, and that they were having this conversation on a super high level. And this thing that I chose for that reason, because it is that conversation on a high level, and I had a scrap of conversation to share with you about it.
Yeah, that is high level. I feel like your class is filling up as people listen. Do you think any members of the band could articulate what they heard of their own recording the way he just did, or have any interest in it?
Well, that the latter is probably harder and harder to happen as they get older, and this stuff both recedes into history and becomes, you know, a smaller and smaller part of their whole. I mean, remember, Bob Weir's probably played more gigs than any other human being in history, except for the guy at the piano bar down here in Oakland who played the same gig for 60 years or something. But I don't know. I have on occasion. I had Phil Lesh at KPFA. And I played that thing that got released on the So Many Roads box set as the beautiful jam. It's just a few minutes of music coming out of the end of the first Wharf Rat the Grateful Dead ever played and going back into the second half of Dark Star. And it's just this absolutely stunning little stretch of music that just makes you cry. And I always loved it. And I pulled it out and I identified it. And when we got hired to do the box set, it was like at the very top of my list of stuff, you know. We got to play this little bit, and everybody agreed, and we couldn't, you know, didn't need to be part of the whole show, although it all got released years later. They mixed that 2/18/71 show and released it as bonus material on one of the, like, a American Beauty reissue or something like that. But it just, they, you know.
Yeah. He said you can't plan it. It just has to happen. I know you mentioned 75 and 76 in that passage, and Steve gets 76 and Jeremy gets 75. Steve, hell of a poll. Talk to us.
I'm not familiar with that run of shows. That was beautiful. I will have to go check that out. But I definitely heard the Travis Bean guitar and Keith's piano tone, and I heard kind of what from that bit you read, David. You know, some of the jazzy elements were there that weren't there in 77. I heard two drummers, so that pretty much made it 76.
Good call.
Yeah, great poll. Jeremy, 75. We get a lot of 75 guesses. What was your thought process there?
this one like completely threw me off, and I was like, I don't know, that was like, it was like the David Lynch of Grateful Dead clips. It was like really surreal, and I'd never heard anything like that. Even though 76 is like one of my favorite years, I'd never heard that one. And it felt like some weird early version of like Eyes of the World, but then also I could recognize like the Travis Bean guitar. And so I really couldn't place it. So I figured it might be like some weird I figured it might be one of like those few 75 shows. I've only really listened to one from the vault, I think. I don't know if I've listened to any of the other four, 3 or 4. I forget how many. There's like 4 or 5.
You gotta check
shows.
out you gotta check out the Keysar one, because it's all weird.
Okay. So I was there's just like a lot of weirdness there that I was not used to. And so I thought it just might be some rare gem, but I definitely am gonna have to check that out as well. And to answer your earlier question, Mike, I think they would be able to articulate that kind of stuff, like the chords and like what Phil is playing under it. But I don't know if they really, whether or not they would ever spend time doing that. I think my intuition and guess would probably be that they wouldn't, and that it's just something that happened, and they would, kind of approach each next show with like a somewhat of a clean slate. That's kind of how I imagine it. That they wouldn't really dwell on these things all that much.
I don't think dwelling is the issue. In the early days, they listened back to their performances a lot. Bear would, they'd schlep a boombox or something around, and they would listen to Bear's recordings after the show. They were critiquing their performance. They were harvesting ideas that might be the nut of something new. And they were Bear was perfecting his mixes, and they were perfecting their communication and stuff. So they would review the music a lot. By the time I started spending time with them in the 80s, it's like all the shit had started blurring together. And that even happened to me. I've been a working musician for 50 years, and they eventually started blurring together for me too. I mean, certain moments do stick out in your life, but it's very hard to differentiate. And it's true that it's sort of more important and more monumental to us. It's just their life, I think we're the ones that cherish it. They cherish having done it, I think, and like that, but I don't think that they're want to go back. Like Bobby in particular is so busy doing his new stuff, you can't get him to go back and revisit the past. He's busy forging new paths.
You don't think he goes home at the end of the night and throws on Cornell 77?
Would you? I review my performance. I play a live show every day online, every afternoon at 4:00. Except, I'm with certain exceptions, but I've been doing it for more than 3 years because of the pandemic. And I actually review my performances most evenings because I'm an improvisational musician and a looper, and I'm doing new things every single time. So I'll go to the spots where the new stuff is happening and review that and find out how it worked. And hear if, I don't sit there and go, oh, I'm going to transcribe this little melody and integrate it into a composition. But a lot of times hearing something back just plants it in your head again, so you can say, oh, I could build on that. So when they were the fingers on a hand and they were traveling together in vans and sleeping, 3 to a hotel room and shit, they did review this stuff really, really closely and critique each other's performances and stuff. And I think part of that is what drove like Weir to make himself into a much more formidable composer than he was when he walked into that scene.
Yeah, and I can't recommend David's performances enough. I watch them on Twitter. I'm sure it's more than on one. It's on Facebook and
YouTube and Facebook, and an interesting platform called Streamstock.tv where you can watch shows in groups of people.
Yeah, it's that perfect time of day when I usually kind of go in delirious answering emails at work, and you pop on, and it's a real refreshing change of pace.
That's so great. It's like, you can listen to me or you can listen to the evening news. I sort of feel like I'm providing an escape or something. But I also feel like I did an interview with the San Francisco Chronicle a couple of years ago, and he fished a line out of the interview and said that I called it a piano bar for hippies. And that's kind of what I think it is. I'm playing like old familiar tunes from the 70s, and I play Grateful Dead songs, and I play my own stuff, and I play loop jams, and I improvise a lot. And I'll play some weird song that fished up out of my brain radio from 60 years ago. That'll come up every once in a while, and I'll learn a song and play it like that. So it really is just whatever I feel like playing in a given afternoon. But it's been amazingly good for my chops and kept me in touch with an audience as well.
Well, that link will be in the show notes. Okay, Steve has 0 points. Jeremy has 1 point because he was 1 year off, which means Steve is up by 1 year. There's 2 songs left. Let's hear the second song of the finals. Okay, 13 at Fillmore West in San Francisco on March 1st, 1969. Definitely our first 13 on Guest of the Year. Tell us about that one, David.
Well, I don't know if it actually has a title or not, but it appeared a number of times. I think it was always coming out of New Potato Caboose, but I can't say for sure. I've heard several of these. And it's a 13 beat thing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it was part of the I'm guessing it was Phil's composition because it's him driving the jam or the piece. I don't know anything more about it. I never really had a chance to ask him if, what it was, but I think it was just one of those tropes that came up similar to what came to be known for better and for worse as the Feeling Groovy jam, in the 73 and 74 China jams, blah, blah, blah. It appeared and then it, wandered off as some of these things do, because I think it was an interesting thing to do, but of limited creative value, because once you've mastered it, then it's just a matter of, it's kind of like rubbing your stomach and tapping your head at the same time. 13B. I mean, Grateful Dead specialized in this shit. I mean, they had the 11. Bobby wrote 3 or 4 masterpieces in 7 beats, and he had playing in the band in 10 beats and stuff. So doing a 13, and there's other stuff too. Like I forget the exact time signature of Stronger Than Dirt, or one of the bits on Blues for Allah is also in an odd time signature. But they specialized in that stuff, but I think they also realized, Jerry once said, I think later, that they stopped doing the 11 because it kind of had limited horizons. Sticking with the meter didn't foster creativity and, flights of invention. So they kind of dropped it after a while. And I think this was also that thing. Okay, well, we nailed that. And maybe just Phil forgot about it after getting it done a few times. It's hard to say. I once listened to like all the Dark Stars in histories. Literally, I spent, for this book project that might still happen someday, I listened to hundreds and hundreds of Dark Stars and sort of evaluated each one and started mapping the progression of various tropes through it and stuff. And I think one of the most significant moments in the history of Darkstar was when Pigpen stopped going bidoo 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 all through the whole fucking thing, because it just, it's like somebody had drawing a dotted line across the Mona Lisa or something in a funny way. So it freed the improvisation when the ostinato was abandoned. But things came up, ways of interacting, of a melodic idea, a riff Jerry was doing on the guitar. They would appear, they would evolve, and then they would wander off and be replaced by other stuff. And in a way, like Darkstar is this ongoing tapestry, if you think of it as one continuous piece of music that just had all these voices weaving through it at various times. So Tom Constantin said that once in an interview back in the 90s. He said, I think of Darkstar as more of a place than a piece of music that you just kind of visit. And it's fun to think of Darkstar as always going on somewhere,
Yeah, awesome pick. And Jeremy got it exactly, 1969. Steve guessed 68. Jeremy, why 69?
It sounded like, just generally 60s, I guess. I don't know, but and like a really distorted, heavy like bass, and a more gain heavy like guitar tone from Jerry and stuff. And then like also the guitar sounded slightly out of tune, which I've noticed from like 69, I guess. Just kind of sounded like the recording quality as well sounded pretty crisp, like kind of like Live Dead, similar to that sound quality. That was pretty much it. I feel like, I would assume a 68 the sound quality would be a little worse. I don't really know how to be more specific than that, but yeah.
You are right to deduce the differences in quality between 68 and 69, because it was at the beginning of 69 that the 16-track tape recorder appeared. Very famously, Ron Wickersham was working at Ampex and helped make it available for these guys. And there were stories of them humping it up the stairs at the Carousel Ballroom, etc. And so they were working with 8 tracks and 2 tracks before that. So most of the recordings are simpler because they were either mixed live to fewer tracks, or a lot of stuff was missing from the recordings. And they did get more, starting in early 69, they had a 16-track machine available to them, I think, a lot more often.
Wow, there you have it. Steve, 68.
I associate that Phil bass lick riff with Two from the Vault from the Shrine in LA in 68. That's where I first heard that. And so that's where my head was like, well, that's 68. And those recordings, that the mastering they did on that is phenomenal.
Those were 8-track. That was 8-track masters. I remember Don Pearson, the late Don Pearson, wrote an interesting story about how they made a model of the stage and knew the distances of things from the delays between tracks. And I guess they were able to correct some of that and make a more coherent stereo mix from those recordings. That's another, the Grateful Dead story is a story of the progression of technology in service of art for all these years. And the Dead have always taken advantage. They always wanted to push that stuff, obviously sound systems and stuff, but they were ready to take advantage of new technology. That's why they hired Bob Brailov to get him up to speed on MIDI interfaces so they could all play trumpet through the guitar and stuff.
Well, I don't know. I don't remember exactly the year that Two from the Vault came out, but was it Sonic Solutions that Pearson used? Because the imaging of the stereo tracks is so detailed that with good quality headphones on, you can hear like the soundstage is different between the two nights. Because they had to tear everything down and put everything back, and you can actually hear that the amps are just in slightly different places. It's amazing.
I don't think they mixed on Sonic Multitrack. That was not Sonic Solutions wound up being better for stereo mastering. I'm a Sonic user and have been since 1992. What they probably did, I can't remember when this happened, but they certainly must have loaded it into a computer and used a digital workstation to mix it, but I don't remember when it happened. So as every few years, the technology has gotten better and better and better. Nowadays, there's this thing called plangent processes. You see it mentioned on most of the modern releases, That is a technology that they go in, that all analog recordings have what's called a bias tone. There's a very, very low volume and high frequency tone that is sent along with the music onto the tape head. And it's the bias that helps create, it makes it possible to encode information in this format. And this guy figured out that even though it's super low level, it's a consistent signal of a known frequency that's on the entire tape. So they make a super high bandwidth transfer of the audio recording, go in there and find the bias tone and reclock the audio signal. So to get rid of the flutter and wow of analog tape. So there's this very subtle but very important clarifying of music that's being done. And that's only in the last, I don't know, 10 or years maybe. It's an outfit called Plangent Processes out of around the Boston area. And it's fascinating what they do. And it's an important addition. But again, every few years, there becomes a new way to do this. I just took, my first record was recorded on ADATs, which is a really, really, really troublesome recording medium. But one of my COVID projects was to go get the ADATs and transfer the whole thing into the computer and remix the record, taking advantage of 25 years worth of new technology in my maturing musicianship and stuff. So we remastered and remixed the entire record using all that. So it's a lot of these things, like, and Bobby just redid Ace. He did a new mix of Ace. And he did that by taking the multi-track masters, loading them into a computer, running them through the plangent thing to correct the time base, and then remixing using all these modern tools. You now have like amazing range of ambiances. You can create reverb chambers like the fucking sarcophagus in the pyramid and things like that. And you know, and so every new generation of technology makes possible some refinements of the audio recordings from previous times.
Brilliant. That's cool, Bobby, to be open to going and taking a look. Well, Tournament of Champions has come down to a tie going into the final song.
Wow.
These guys are only 1 year off across 2 songs. And if you thought the next song was going to be a touch of gray, you'd be wrong. Let's hear it. So that was a jam at the Portland Memorial Coliseum in Portland, Oregon on May 19th, 1974. David, yeah, tell us about that one.
Well, one thing I want you to know about it is that this is the first tape I ever got out of the vault. They gave me access in 1985, this was the first tape I went for because I was at the show. And there was only one, I'd only ever heard one audience tape, and it was a messed up tape because the guy had a brand new TC-152 and he didn't realize that he should have used pause button instead of stopping and starting every time. So every song has a sort of a weird tape glitch at the beginning. So there was just a crappy audience tape of it for years, and I wanted to hear it again because I loved the show so very much. So when I first got access to the vault in 1985, which, by the way, involved Willie Legate opening the vault and wandering away and leaving me in there to do whatever I wanted. A few months later, Dick LaValla was hired to be the archivist, and then we started working together on it. And he was, he supervised my visits and stuff, and it was all fine. We had a great time doing it. But anyway, that was one of the first songs. That was the first tape I ever got out of the vault, and I got it out because I just freaking loved that jam. It was a great 1974 show, which was released a few years ago on a box set, the Pacific Northwest 73-74 set. It was one of 6 shows, amazing box set from a tremendous period in Grateful Dead history. And this particular set is my favorite. They play whatever the usual stuff, the greatest story of Bertha or whatever in the beginning of the second set. And then something goes wrong and they play Tico Tico while the amp's getting fixed or whatever. And then they launch into this truckin', and it's just a kick-ass truckin'. And coming out of this truckin', they go off into these jams. And let me see if I don't want to get the list, the order of songs wrong. No, that's really all there is to it. Truckin', jam, Mind Left Body Jam, Not Fade Away, Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. But they went through what you just heard was getting what they call the Mind Left Body Jam on the list. But it went on for a really long time, and it went through a lot of different phases. And Jerry was using that fuzz on his guitar, which was fairly rare for that time. And everybody else was just, Kreutzmann in his fucking prime, Keith, everybody was, just doing what they did at the top of their game in that stretch in front of the wall of sound. And it just got better and better and better. The way they went, the jams went, and then as they resolved into songs, they did so in fascinating ways. The way, by the time they finally got to Not Fade Away, we'd been through a couple of, orbited a couple other planets along the way. And then the way they get into Not Fade or Going Down the Road Feeling Bad later is also very cool. And it all just kind of winds down into a pretty monumental One More Saturday Night to end the set. So it's just a top 10 sequence of Grateful Dead music that I would recommend to everybody to appreciate what this band did at their best.
I'm just imagining you walking out of the vault holding that reel. It's like a big old smile.
Well, but walking out of the vault with it was cool, but getting to play it on radio and turn people onto it. My job for 38 years now has been turning people onto the Grateful Dead through a medium that they can get for free. It's one of my favorite things in my life and my travels is meeting people who say, I'm a Deadhead because of you. They stumbled across it on WXRT or something, And I usually say, I hope your parents have forgiven me.
My mom's going to listen to this, and so she'll appreciate that, I assure you.
My dad, too.
Well, these guys are pretty incredible. They both got 74. We're going to another song. Jeremy, what'd you hear?
To me, 73 and 74 sound pretty similar usually. Like I could usually identify those, but within those two, it can be kind of tricky to discern. But that like fuzz on Jerry's guitar, I did not really associate with that era. And so I thought it might be the latter of those 2 years because it might have been more of a new development. And I guess like I forget, I can't remember if I think Keith plays like a Rhodes piano in both of those years, 73 and 74, but I for some reason associate it more with 74. So yeah, that's what I went with. That was a great clip though. Like I love how like Bill is just like all over the place in a good way though. Like he's just like going crazy.
And Donna Jean told me that she thought that Kreutzmann had like one limb attached to each of the guys in the band, that he could respond to what anybody was doing. He was paying attention to all of them and attuned to all of them.
Love that. Steve, also 74. Talk to us.
The fuzz tone helped a lot, and Bobby's was an ES 335 that has a very distinct tone. Yeah, and love a good Mind Left Body Jam.
All right, before we go on to the tie-breaking fourth song of the finals, David, We ask everyone who comes on how they got into the Dead. How did you get into the Dead?
I was a young singer-songwriter wannabe in San Jose, California, still pretending to go to college. And I'd been writing songs with a guy I met in high school, and we had gone to San Jose State together, and we were continuing to write songs together. And he started telling me all about the Grateful Dead, and they were he kept saying they were the second greatest rock and roll band in the world because Sam Cutler had introduced the Rolling Stones and called them the greatest rock and roll band in the world. So I guess Stephen Donnelly was his name, and I think he was stipulating to Sam Cutler's opinion there. But he kept telling me I should go see the Grateful Dead, and I kind of said, I don't know. They don't sound, that sounds kind of hard rock to me. I'm a folky. And then I looked at their record jackets, and they had a song called Ripple, and I thought, oh, great, another tune about cheap wine. And then they had Cumberland Blues and New Speedway Boogie, and I thought, I don't like those art forms. I'm a folk singer. So I imagine, as I wrote this is a quote from my new book, imagine my surprise when I heard those songs and what they actually were. So Stephen persuaded me to go. We got tickets to this thing. We took what turned out to be a really, really large dose of window pane acid each. And our designated driver delivered us from San Jose into Winterland. We had some car trouble along the way, so we got there really late, and we were like the last people in. And wound up in the last row of Winterland. It must have been 120 degrees up there. And we missed most of the Sons of Champlin set. We saw the New Riders of Purple Sage set, and I recognized a few of their tunes. And then the Grateful Dead took the stage, and I was so fucking high. And it was so hot, and I was really kind of paranoid and didn't feel comfortable for various reasons. I didn't have a great relationship with psychedelics when I was younger. But I got enough of it. I came home and I remembered little bits of things. And as my buddy Donnelly reminded me, we had dinner together a couple months ago, and he reminded me, he said, the next morning you went out and got every damn Grateful Dead thing you could find and started making that, learning that music and stuff. So I did. I got all the records that I could find, and I started recognizing the little bits. I realized that one of the things that stuck with me was Bertha. One of them, when Ace came out, I realized that that Bobby's guitar style was kind of epitomized in Greatest Story Ever Told, and various other bits. And I kind of didn't quite get Pigpen. He did the familiar tunes. He did a big, long version of Good Lovin', but I had no fucking idea what was going on in the jam when he wasn't singing. So that was the first time, but I guess I sort of just took to it and started making myself literate in it as soon as possible. And I think the most important thing about it was that it just opened my horizons as a musician. These songs didn't tell you everything they know the first time you hear them. They weren't designed to be catchy and get your attention on the radio. They were designed to engage you on various levels over longer stretches of time. And I mean, I don't even know whether they did that on purpose, but they created a form of music that rewarded ongoing engagement by giving us something new every fucking time they did it.
Thank you, David. And guys, going on to the 7th song. Let's hear it. was Cassidy at Cal Expo in Sacramento on May 27th, 1993. Our first 90s song. Why did you choose that one in particular to lead off the 90s?
Because I have a really, really fun story to go with it. That's why. I was a colleague and dear friend, the late, great John Sievert, was a musician, a music journalist and a photographer who I'd known for years. And he was assigned an interview with Bob Weir and Jerry Garcia together in 1993. And he asked me to come along and record it. And he asked me if I had any questions he would, I wanted him to ask. And I can't remember what else I might have suggested, but I said, yeah, why don't you ask them how come Cassidy never jammed into another song? And he put it on his list of questions, and he asked him the damn question, and I recorded it. I was sitting right there, he didn't, Bob and Jerry both looked at each other and went, I don't know. I don't know. It just never came up. I'm sitting thinking to myself, why didn't you guys? I mean, it was a natural, could have gone up in any number of things. It just had never come up. Anyway, a few weeks later at Cal Expo, I remind them about this conversation. And they go, oh, yeah, let's see what we can come up with. And so in the second set, they played that Cassidy. And I was really surprised that it went into Uncle John's band, because Cassidy is in E and Uncle John's band is in G, and it wasn't really, musically they didn't really sort of do a super creative transition into it. They wound it down, and Jerry wasn't a total lurch, but it was, it was a fairly graceful pivot, but it wasn't like musically like they drifted beautifully and gradually from one to the other, but it was still pretty damn cool. But I was curious to know why it wound up being Uncle John's band. But I was obviously gratified as hell that they, when I reminded them about the conversation, they did something about it. The only time they ever did something about it. But it was really fun to have, influenced or gotten them to consider that question.
Wow. So what we just heard is a result of your idea. That's incredible.
Well, see, what I asked, why didn't Cassidy go into something? But it was their decision to make Cassidy go into Uncle John's band. It was quite a surprise. And what the hell?
Can't believe it. Both these guys got it. 93.
Why can't you believe it? It wasn't that difficult to choose.
So, Steve, you messaged that in immediately almost. What's going on?
I was at the first two of those shows. And so the next day, people were talking about, oh, you missed the Cassidy Uncle John's thing. And then, I listened to it later. But it was worth it because the band that I was in at the time was playing a little deal up in the Sierra Nevadas called Meat Cutters. Meat Cutters. Yeah, it's defunct now, but it was kind of a homegrown festival featuring bands from that region. And our job was to wake people up, I think, Sunday morning. There was like 3 people in front of us, but
I've had that shift at festivals a few times. Hi everybody, rise and shine.
That's right, beat's working.
Well, they always tell yourself, and it's usually true that a lot of people did listen from their tents. They come up to tell you later that they heard your set from the tent. But yeah, it's sometimes weird playing for almost nobody.
Yeah. But it was I've got my own stories from those 2 nights, those 2 shows. It was just delightful and wonderful in so many levels. And it was one of my good friends' first show. And, it was really one of those things where it was like, the Dead could still do it in 93, right? Like those were honest to God, grateful goddamn concerts, grateful goddamn dead concerts. And
that was the last really solid run I saw.
Those shows, and I saw Autzen later in August, and those shows were great. And, and those were the last great shows I saw. So
I was at Autzen, actually, now that you mention it. I would have to think about whether they were better. I don't know. I just think of Cal Expo as the last, run that I thought they had their shit together from start to finish.
The Standing on the Moon from August 21st, I'll stand up against almost anything.
All right, I'll take your advice on that. I need to go read that. That also has that weird fantastic Jack Straw where...
That's the next night where Bobby's guitar lunch is out. And the Help Slip Frank to open set 2 on that one's pretty smoking too. So there's definitely some moments about standing on the moon, literally. And I was relatively sober that first night. And it was so, at the final crescendo, it was so powerful. It literally dropped me to my knees. It was so loud and so emotional that I just crumbled. And it was amazing.
Thank you for telling me. I'm going to go listen to that, because I'm always looking for a show. You know, I have to mix up the years on the Grateful Dead Hour. I don't just play my favorite years, you know.
Right.
It can't just be the 73 show. So I mix it up and try and find.
Well, that'd be a hell of a podcast.
It would be a great way to get drummed out of the industry, actually. But anyway, I will go back and listen to those again, because it's not that 93 was a bad year. There was a lot of really good stuff in the summer tour as well. But just from my having been there, things got a little more like, for example, Cal Expo 94. Jerry just really looked awful.
Not great. The Autzen shows, if my memory serves me correctly, are the first shows with the Cripe guitar, the top hat or whatever that was, because it has the unique kind of acousticy sound.
Oh, I hated that.
It was controversial, and so don't let that sour you on the Standing on the Moon though, because it's great.
I think that I'm not sure about the technology of that guitar, but that thing of putting piezo pickups on electric guitars has become a more robust technology in the years since then. I think that technology has gotten better, because they're sort of modeling amps and stuff. So if you have a good, clean, solid piezo pickup in your electric guitar, you get the advantage of an electric guitar, but it interfaces nicely to modeling amps and stuff. So I think that's gotten better. But I play a Rick Turner Renaissance, and I stay away from modeling amps. So anyway, enough said.
Jeremy, also 93. You were not there. How did you figure it out?
I was -5 years old.
What the ever? What?
It sounded like, so there was only one. I could only hear one keyboard player, and so I knew it was like, probably post the like Bruce Hornsby being, I think he was around like 90, 91, 92. And as the 90s went on, I think Bob's tone got more distorted, more so than ever before in the past. And maybe in like the 60s it was there, but that's what kind of suggested early 90s, to me.
Yeah, there were people who referred to that as Bobby's garbage disposal sound.
I always kind of dug that. I thought it was kind of cool.
Jerry's playing, his tone sounds very like thin at that point as well to me. That's like the one adjective that comes to mind. It's very thin.
Yeah, but see, they started this. I forget exactly which thing happened at which time, but they went to in-ear monitors, I believe, in 1992, and that changed the way they listened to each other, and it changed the way they heard each other, and it changed the way they sounded on stage. And then they went to this thing of everything going direct. And there was a moment, I think it was in 93, but it might have been 94. Do you remember this? That when everything, like Jerry had a speaker in a suitcase that was mic'd behind the stage, and everybody was going direct into the PA, and there were no speakers on stage. And there was a moment in the middle of a song when Dan Healy turned off the PA, and the only thing you heard coming off the stage was the drums. It was insane. It was maximum isolation. And I really, and I'm not the only one, felt that there was a great detriment into it. It was isolation from one another musically. And Jerry's guitar was part of that. I think he was running into this system, and I think there was like, they were using emulation rather than actual speakers and stuff. But the definitive history on that, of course, is Blair Jackson's Grateful Dead gear. And once again, it's I don't geek out on the guitars and stuff. This is kind of the limit of my appreciation or understanding how that stuff works.
The 93 sound, I think, it was kind of like the early 80s soundboards where they're just kind of flat. But if you listen to the audience recording, they are not flat. And 93 is kind of the same way, because those and the soundboards do have this weird kind of compressed tinny quality to them, but the audience recordings are just fine.
Well, that's what matters. Because these soundboard tapes weren't mixed to be soundboard tapes. They are monitor recordings of the live sound feed, and the quality of the mixes varied according to the needs of the sound reinforcement systems over the years and the capabilities of the sound reinforcement systems over the years. Nowadays, when Dead and Company goes on tour, I believe the front of house guy sends stems off to the stage where another guy takes the sub mixes and creates a live mix to go out over nugs.net. And then later, offline, somebody else does the mix for the download version. So those things actually get a proper mix after the show. But you would not believe how many inputs Derek Featherstone has, both in front of him and off to the side. There's a whole nother board that's just for Mickey's stuff. That's like, I don't know, 64 inputs or something.
That seems entirely appropriate.
If you got it, flaunt it.
Right.
So we got another tiebreaker here. Let's play the next song. Holy shit. David. Okay, I'm sorry. Whoa. Okay, this was a Dark Star at this is a Dark Star at Miami Arena on October 26th, 1989. David, wild Dark Star. Tell us about that one.
Well, you can sort of pick, as you noted, you can sort of pick this sort of thing at random because the deeply abstract stuff is easily pulled out of its time frame and can be, you'd have to be pretty fucking perspicacious to deduce which voices were being used by which guy with their MIDI adapters, on which tour. So this could be 94, it could be, 89. Anytime after the MIDI stuff comes along, this could be, and then you just sort of, what are your other clues? Does that sound like Vince's keyboards or Brent's keyboards? I chose this particular one on the recommendation of a friend who thinks it's one of the most intense and important latter-day performances of the Grateful Dead, and I'll elaborate on that once you've been through your process here.
Steve was able to tell the difference. He nailed 89, and he's the champion of Guest of the Year, Season 1. Congratulations, Steve. A poll of polls to end the season, and Jeremy, the reason I was laughing, because he sent in a 1990 before you, and I was like, well, Jeremy's the champ, that's it. And then Steve came in with the 89. Steve,
wow,
please talk to us. Congratulations.
It almost feels like cheating because I had it on tape. And I agree with David's friend's sentiment, like that Dark Star. My first show was 7/12/90 at RFK Stadium, and I was in a similar state, David, that you were at your first show. And that Victim of the Crime and Dark Star ground me into a pulp. I was terrified. It was raining. It wasn't just raining, it was storming. and I was covered in mud, and I had no idea what was going on. I was surrounded by 64,000 lunatics, and the Dead were just kicking my ass into the dirt. And so, like, I have an affinity for those weird MIDI dark stars. And so I kind of know that one.
So you had a reasonably accessible first set there, standard stuff.
Yeah.
And then they
Pretty
play
easy going. Yeah, it's really nice.
What would it be like? Did you know anything about the Grateful Dead? I mean, I'm trying to imagine coming to a scene and hearing a band play something like Victim or The Crime for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, what the ever lovin'?
Well, so I had some tapes, like I had 62186. I had one of the 82 Red Rock shows on tape that I'd had for a few years. That's another story. So I kind of had some idea-ish, but I had no clue. I had never been surrounded by 64,000.
Weird.
Yeah, I did. I knew that. But like my biggest problem that day, and I'm not kidding, was I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do to the music. I didn't, because everybody just started dancing, and I was a headbanger, man. I'd seen like Metallica and Pink Floyd and whatever. And so like the wide open space of what I could do with my body and how to respond to the tsunami of sound. Right. And it wasn't until after Drums in Space and that I didn't know they played all on the Watchtower, but I recognized it coming out of space. I recognized the guitar, and I just started dancing to save my soul. There was no question. There was no decision. I just started moving.
And so this other unfamiliar stuff had sort of opened you up to it, and then something you could latch on to.
Mickey Hart opened me up to it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
and so by the time we got to like familiar territory, I was dancing like a new young man.
Oh, that's fabulous. You had
well, it was fabulous.
Well, you gave up your heavy metal ways.
100% actually. Yeah.
Bill Graham
not entirely, but
no, I understand. I know a lot of, I mean, hell, Rob Bleetstein, my colleague at Sirius XM, he's a big Pearl Jam. He's like a huge Pearl Jam fan. And I know lots of people who like Grateful Dead and lots of other heavy metal and stuff. What was I about to say though? Oh yeah, Bill Graham said a lot of times people will sort of grow out of certain kinds of music. Once the hormones stop raging, the heavy metal doesn't matter quite as much. He said, but people never grew out of the Grateful Dead. People stayed with it. They get into the Grateful Dead in college, and they stayed with the Grateful Dead into their lives and into their careers and into their, grandparenthood and stuff. And it's not music that you outgrow, partly because they kept it growing and they keep it growing. And they were evolving, but they also just created this huge body of literature that you have access, almost unlimited access to. So anybody can become a Deadhead right now and get up to speed on 50 freaking years of archives on.
You said something that's just so true. Like today I was at work, and this is just a quick aside, but like I was having kind of a thing, and I was out walking just to kind of clear my headspace. And I was listening to the Road Jimmy from Today in 73 on the Re-Listen app. And like the things that I've been through in my life in the last 30 years with this band and these music, like the songs are always appropriate. The songs just keep growing with me. And like, what else does that? I don't know.
Well, that's another aspect of this music. Again, it's got a lot of subtlety to it, and that too rewards ongoing engagement. Like I don't know if would you have gone to like, 4 Slayer shows in a row?
No,
because it would have been the same show every time,
yeah.
Right? I mean, you would go to 4 Grateful Dead shows in a row because you might hear one song twice or 3 or 2 or 3 songs twice over the course of 4 shows, but probably not. And every performance of the song would be different from other performances you've heard. We engage these songs over time. And that's another great thing. Like you meet somebody new, like we're sharing all these stories about times we were all in the same room together and all that. You can compare notes, and you've been in the same place with people over time. And that's our shared histories is also a part of it. Do you guys listen to the good old Grateful Dead cast?
Oh yeah.
Mind blowing. So damn good. I was just listening to the Let Me Sing Your Blues Away episode. There's this really beautiful little sidebar about the tape collecting and tape trading. And there's a great line from Harvey Lubar, who passed away a few years ago. And he was just saying, he was thinking about all the deep friendships. He said, you sit there with your decks and you'd be copying the tapes and you talk to each other and you learn about each other's lives. And he was talking about the incredible depth of friendship. And I'm on a mailing list with a bunch of guys that have been trading buddies for 50 years, you know. It is the community that built up around it is as important as the music itself in a way.
That's 100% true.
And talking about people who can go into the archive and listen to all this new music and ingest it who are not there. Jeremy was not there, did not.
Are you literally like 25 years old?
Yeah, I'm 25.
What the hell are you doing here with all of us geezers?
You are amazing.
Thanks.
Incredible. How'd you get up to speed?
Through archive.org, Spotify, setlists.net. I'm a big fan of for, searching exactly how many times and where and when they played any given song.
And how do you organize your explorations?
That's a good question. I don't think I really organize it that much.
So you just pick a date at random, or a year at random, or a tour at random?
Or
a section?
A show that's on a Dick's Picks release, or some sort of commercial release that's on Spotify that I like. I've used the website headyversion.com a lot to, where people
that's kind of crowdsourced, right?
Yeah, people vote on their favorite version of a given song. High Time, for example, like that. The number one High Time on Heady version is very much worth checking out.
And how long have you been marinating in this?
I've been playing guitar for like 12 years, and then I would say 7 to 8 years I've been listening to the Dead, like since late high school, I would say, is when I really got into it.
That's great.
And my dad he's been on the show as well. He's a huge Deadhead and went to like 150 shows in his day, and so kind of rubbed off on me, I suppose.
Well, Mike, you're pretty young too, so I guess I shouldn't be making age jokes here.
Yeah, but I would have been more than 1 year off on that Dark Star.
It's gratifying to see young people getting into this stuff. I know a lot of young musicians too who couldn't possibly have seen Jerry play, but they are deeply into this music and they speak this language. And we knew that. We had that. It came up in an interview with Jerry in '81 that this music was going to outlive the people who made it. And he recognized that, and we've all been proving it true. All of us who play this music, it's the songs have a life of their own. It's a folk music of its own.
A beautiful way to end the season. Thank you, David, for this completely original, amazing set list, and for just lending your insights and your time. And yeah, I can't thank you enough.
I had a great time.
You've probably heard this a couple times, David, but you kind of joked about it earlier, but your radio show was my lifeline to the Dead at a time in my life when it was really important to me. And so I want to take this opportunity, since I have it, to thank you for your work, because it's meant a lot to me over the years.
That right there is one of the main reasons for having done it, to turn people on to it and to make it available to everybody. Jay Blakesberg says, we're lucky we got that strain of DNA that appreciates this. And, there's people that get it and people that don't. So it's always gratifying to, put it out there and see who picks up on it, because that's your community. It's so nice. Thank you.
Lovely. And Steve, congratulations. And Jeremy, congratulations as well. And yeah, thank you again, David.
I enjoyed it and I learned a lot from doing it. So thank you. Everybody wins.
Thanks so much again, David, and all our contestants. I'll spare everyone the thank yous because I did them last week, but thank you, everyone. For all the show links, including our YouTube channel, go to guesttheyear.net. And if you want to be a contestant on the show for season 2, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guesttheyear.net. We're going to be taking a break, and we'll be back in November with a lot of good contestants and a lot of good curators. So very excited about that. Stay tuned. Shout out to Dylan for drawing the poster this week and every week. Dylan's Instagram page is tagged in the show notes. You can check out all of his art, his animation, designs. Very talented guy, as you can see from the posters. So yeah, 30,000 feet in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congratulations to Steve on winning season 1. And to other contestants, thanks for playing, and remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night. And I bid you good night, good night, good night.